So if you're talking about like in the scenario where you have not been proactive with your contract ownership and you're now in a lawsuit, you're probably not going to get out of that lawsuit for less than, I'm going to say $25,000 to $50,000. And that's probably on a good day. If it gets real contentious and you have to really fight, it's going to be upwards of $75,000 to just get out of the lawsuit. And by the way, when I say that number, I'm just talking about attorney fees. I'm not talking about what you may actually ultimately having to pay out to the other side as a settlement or a judgment. All of these things that are very expensive, we can't sit back and do nothing and just let that happen. We have to then engage as well. And so if let's say you've got a David and Goliath type of situation where you've got a huge flush GC on one side and a small mom and pop guy on the other, a strategy is to outspend. They could make the strategy of like, we're going to do every single thing that the legal code allows us to do.
We're going to bury you. We're going to bury you.
Exactly. Because we can absorb that cost. It's not going to hurt us, but we know this guy can't play that game. He can't keep up.
Hi, Gavin Coyle here. I'm the Gaffer, and the great guests keep on coming. This time all the way from California, we've got Megan Shapiro. She's a massive amount of experience in the area of legal. And so one of her fortes that she's decided to create a niche for herself is in the area of contractors and subcontractors and helping them navigate the risks of contract law. It's very, very important for our audience because it's one thing that keeps on coming up the whole time. Gavin, can you get more guests on that can help us in terms of how to read these contracts, how to understand these contracts? And Megan has obviously seen that from her corporate background and decided to get in and start coaching people. So she has set up a really important company called Construction Contractor Coach. Sorry, Megan, and it's trademarked as well. So Megan, welcome to the podcast. We've been trying to get you for a good while now, so it's great to get you on board.
Thank you. I'm super excited to finally be able to make this happen.
Yeah, we had some ups and downs, but give us a sense of your background because it's really strong in the area of legal and in that industry. And I know that maybe it might not be entirely specific to construction. So let's just give us the A to Z of where you started and where you are today.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I've been a practicing attorney licensed in California, as you said, for almost 15 years now. I didn't start out doing construction law. I sort of fell into it. Like a lot of people, I went to law school thinking that I would do criminal law because that's what, we see on TV and movies and that's what looks exciting. But I graduated law school during the Great Recession that the U.S. had in, the 2008 to 2010 time period. So none of the district attorney's offices or public defender's offices were hiring. So I kind of had to pivot. And I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to be able to find a job right away. But it was working for a solo practitioner who was doing civil litigation. And from there, I sort of found my way into the firm that I've been with now since 2012. And when I started here as like a second year attorney, they had a much smaller construction practice, and it was sort of the training ground for new lawyers. So when I was the new girl on the team, they were sort of like, okay, here's the construction practice. There's not much to it, but this is a good place for you to sort of get the training wheels on and then off. And it didn't end up working out that way because I sort of fell in love with it. And I got very lucky because our primary client at the time was a concrete subcontractor. And they had hired a new general manager right around the same time that I had joined the firm. And when he came on, he said, you know what, I'm looking at our profit and loss statement and I'm seeing a pretty big spend on legal each month. I want to dig into this myself and sort of take some ownership of this also. So he and I kind of came together. We were both new. We were both like, well, we don't really know what our predecessors on either side were doing and how they were handling it. So this is a great opportunity for us to create our own system and approach these cases and attack this the way that we want to do it. And so that's exactly what we did. We built out the system of how we wanted to approach their construction litigation. And I went to the partners at the time and said, hey guys, this does not have to be the training ground for new lawyers anymore. I want to take ownership of this. I've discovered a passion that I never knew existed. I love concrete. Who knew? and I want to stick with it. And so from there, I've built it out and developed it. And now my personal practice at the firm is probably 90 to 95% construction. I am still litigating full time, but about a year ago, I sort of said, you know what? There's a better way to approach these construction disputes on the front end. We can be a little bit more proactive about this stuff if we're intentional about how we are reviewing, redlining, marking up, and negotiating contracts from the beginning, so that we can minimize the likelihood that we'll have claims and end up in litigation on the back end. So I kind of put my head down and created a sort of system to approach that, and then realized, you know what, this is not state law specific, and this isn't trade specific. So I can actually get this out to the world and help more subcontractors implement this system so that they can maximize profits by decreasing claims through ownership of their contracts. And so I started my side business, construction contract coaching, and that's what brought me to you.
No, I think it's brilliant, and I love the fact that it can travel, that it's not, we tend to think in silos in terms of construction. People think just what goes on in the UK stays in the UK, and that's the way they operate. But that's not the case. Like the more times we do these podcasts with guests like yourself, the more you start seeing commonality across the industry. So we all suffer from not having the labour available at the moment. That's one of the biggest topics that's going around. There is more, obviously, but the shortage of materials was a big issue at one stage as well. But the commonality of how contracts are structured to favour one party over the other party is a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
So are you when you do your training courses, are you trying to educate people how not to take on a contract?
In some cases, yes. So my approach is primarily, foundationally, you need to understand what you're reading and what you're agreeing to so that you can make an informed decision about whether or not this is a risk you're willing to take and a job that you actually want to get into. Part of the coaching includes giving sort of negotiation techniques and tactics that, draw upon, of course, my experience as an attorney. I'm negotiating all the time, and I have been forever. And so I kind of have formed some of those strategies and techniques that I use for negotiating in litigation. And I've packaged those in a way that I pass that on to my clients to say, when you're negotiating these red lines and markups, here's how you can be more effective in that conversation. And part of that is designed very intentionally to draw out from the other side. I mostly work with subcontractors. So the other side, of course, would be general contractors. It's to draw out from them information that will allow the subcontractor to kind of get a little bit of a peek under the curtain or behind the curtain to really know what kind of trade partner this GC is going to be if they've never worked with them before. So some of the questions that I give them to ask in that contract negotiation phase are designed to uncover whether or not this is a project they really should actually probably walk away from.
Brilliant. Love it. I love it. It's like a triage system going into A&E. You're basically saying whether you should go left or right. And I love that. So it's a risk assessment of the contract.
Yes. Yes. The contract and the contractor on the other side.
100%. So ultimately, the root cause is the contractor who developed the contract. So really it's risk assessment training of contracts. And then you make up your own mind and your own gut feeling whether you can actually follow through with this. And it's not as if you didn't know when you take on the contract that you weren't blind going into these contracts. And I think that's a massive plus for you as well, because people are blind and they just think that the honour system is good enough to get them through the door and just get the job done. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've seen too many companies that believe that, and now they're not in business anymore.
Yeah. Can you give us some, without any specifics of company names and stuff like that, can you give us some case studies of maybe where you've had to interject and you just see things just going completely into chaos and disintegrating? Like, what does that process look like from a legal point of view? Because I'm fascinated myself with law, but I'm also fascinated with how you guys can become detached from the personal trauma that's happening. And I understand why you have to do that. And I 100%, you can't not bring it home with you. I'm sure there's bits of it that still brings home. I'm not saying that you're a cold person or you're a cold person industry, but you have to protect yourself as well, I would imagine. And so did you have some anecdotes of your corporate life and how you see these things playing out, and like maybe something that stuck out for you and said, wow, when it goes wrong, that one really went wrong?
Yeah, actually, I do. And I'm fortunate because I can talk in a little bit more detail with specificity because this particular client has disclosed publicly our relationship. And she was actually a guest on my podcast, Risk to Revenue. And we talked a little bit about this. And so I can talk more in more detail than I'd have to otherwise be a little bit more vague. But so that their company is a tile subcontracting company. And it's one of these family businesses. They've been in business, I think, for 45 years or so. I may be a little bit off on the timeline there. And they've been my client for, I think we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary, we realized. And a couple of years ago, they ended up facing what was potentially a really catastrophic claim. It was on the construction defect side. And there were issues with how the allegations were made that they were intentionally brought by the GC. It was a developer to try not to trigger coverage because there was a little bit of a spite thing going on. And so my client was facing a catastrophic claim and a challenge to get insurance. And it was the kind of claim that really had the potential to put the company out of business if it went south. And there were a lot of sleepless nights on both sides, mine and the client side. I would get late night emails. He was respectful. And so he didn't, he would text me occasionally, but he didn't text me after hours and stuff like that. But I get the late night emails and the early morning phone calls of like, I can't sleep. I'm stressed. I don't know what to do. I'm worried that I'm going to lose our family legacy, sort of all of these like very intense things that I think a lot of business owners don't really understand and appreciate if they haven't been in the situation where they are facing a catastrophic loss. I think what happens oftentimes, particularly for construction companies, if they have been fortunate enough to have not yet faced that kind of loss, they don't really understand the true emotional impact of being involved in a lawsuit. And that one, we were involved in it. It probably went on for 4 years before we were finally able to resolve it. And fortunately, through a lot of hard work and working together and collaborating, we were able to get insurance involved and we were able to resolve the case in a way that allowed the company to continue to operate, and they are still in business to this day. But I'm not using this word lightly. It was traumatic for them. And the sort of ripple effect and the long-term ramifications of having been involved in something like that impact how they do business to this day. So, I'm glad you brought up the emotional part of being involved in a lawsuit, in litigation, because I think a lot of times, like I said, business owners truly underestimate what that's going to actually feel like when they get involved in that.
Yeah. That's so that was heading for an uninsured loss at one stage, which was going to come off the bottom line and which had personal guarantees and which had mortgages attached to it and personal liability and all the rest of it. And was that designed by the general contractor in such a way to get out of the having to pay the tiler whatever they needed to pay them? Do you think it was manipulated? I know you can't probably say that because it probably might come back and hurt you.
Yeah. I'm trying to think how I can answer that question.
That looked like they were deliberately manufactured.
So what I will say is the contractor did not owe my client money. So I don't think that they framed it that way to get out of paying. I suspect, this is my pure speculation, I suspect that developer did it that way because they were upset that my client had terminated the master service agreement with them and had said, we're no longer interested in continuing to do work with you into the future. And I think they were upset about that.
Wow.
Yeah. Again, that's my theory. I have no proof of that. I have no evidence to back that up. That's my theory.
And could I ask you, and again, you don't have to answer this, but the tiling contractor, why the hell would they make that statement halfway through a relationship, or when they're still in the relationship?
They didn't, and I can't. We were very intentional about how we exited that relationship, and we did it all above board. So this construction defect claim actually arose several years after the termination.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Wow. So it just goes to show you that you can have a legacy attachment to a project that you thought was well in the past, or out the gate. We've done the job, and next thing you get a phone call or a letter in the post to say that job you done 7 years ago. Yeah, that's a problem, and we're coming for you.
Yeah, in California, that time period's 10 years. It's for residential projects. It's 10 years. It's a very long time to have that sort of axe ominously hanging over your head.
Yeah, it's in Europe and a lot of the UK stuff and Ireland stuff. From a design perspective, if you've been involved in any part of the design, there's no number on that. That can come back to you 20, 30 years, whatever.
Yeah, it's scary.
It is scary, and we don't spend enough time thinking about these type of issues. We just think Monday to Friday, January to February, February to March, and there isn't a pot that's left, which is an interesting point. Do you encourage people to have the rainy day fund for litigations?
Yeah, always. So usually most of the time there's going to be insurance involved, right? It's uncommon for a lawsuit that involves allegations about your work for there not to be insurance involved. And so my recommendation is usually, in terms of the rainy day fund, you need to have at least enough there to cover your insurance deductibles. Right. So that way, if you get the claim, you tender it to insurance. Insurance says, yep, there's coverage for this, but you still have to pay your deductible. I always recommend making sure that there's enough in the rainy day fund to at least cover your deductible. That's if you're sort of cash strapped, right? And you are kind of January to February, February to March, or even Friday to Friday for payroll. But for the bigger, more secure clients who've got a little bit more padding, then I do recommend having a little bit more funding there on the off chance that there's going to be an uncovered claim. So that way we've got some money to play with to give us more options. The more money that we have available, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm automatically throwing it to the other side, of course, but the more money that's there, the more options we have about strategies that we can follow and implement to get to the resolution that we want.
So are the bigger companies, in your view, do they have a percentage, do they have models around percentages that they leave towards litigation and dispute resolution? Like, is there, we leave 1% or 0.1% or 0.5% of our annual revenue towards the fact that we might have a reputational problem or a defects problem later on down the road? Or do you see anything like that?
I haven't personally seen them do it that way. That's not to say that nobody does. What I usually see, on the other hand, is they will usually use historical data of like, okay, well, let's look at 2023 and how much did we actually spend on quote unquote legal? Because that would include attorney fees, settlements, deductibles, anything that's related to a legal claim. So they'll use historical data to project forward, and that's how they'll determine how much to set aside.
Okay, that makes sense. And at what point, if I'm Gavin Coyle Contracting LLC, at what point should I be looking at maybe an in-house legal representative that can work with the bigger corporate legals to manage my business? Some people have this imposter syndrome that feel that, why I should be employing a legal person because I'm only such a size.
So I think if you're asking about actually hiring an in-house attorney, then that's a different question than if you're saying at what point should I have somebody on staff who's not an attorney necessarily, but is the person that's kind of taking ownership of interfacing with our attorneys that we have outside. So yes. That's the
That's
one.
what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So then I would say there should be somebody from the very beginning. I don't care what size you are, because it doesn't have to be this one person whose sole job it is. So that way you're looking at your line item budget projections for the year, and you're saying, okay, I got to dedicate a salary for one person who's dedicated to legal. It doesn't have to be that at all. In fact, if you're very brand new, just starting, you're the trade subcontractor who's decided to finally go out on your own, and you're starting from the very beginning, you can do it yourself. And that's what I love about, not to do a pitch for myself, but that's what I love about my model. And I've designed it very intentionally that way, because oftentimes those guys are the ones who need it the most, and they're the ones that think they can't afford it. And that's just not the case. There are easy to implement, easy to understand, easy to learn systems from the very beginning that you can do yourself, even as a one-man shop or a handful shop, where you just pick the one person, whether it's your project manager, whether it's you, whether you actually hire somebody with the title contract manager. It doesn't really matter. You just need that one person who has ownership over the contracts, and they can be the one that can learn and implement all of the proactive risk management systems, understand the contract strategies, and then guide the rest of the company that way. It does not have to be, it's not one of these things where it's like, well, not until you're 50 million annual revenue, then you need to dedicate time and energy and resources to this. In fact, I would argue if you wait that long, it's going to cost you more, because now we're cleaning up what you didn't do from the beginning.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, 100%. I'll be straight with you. Full disclosure, I designed that question because I knew that you solved that answer with your contractor coach business, and I'd love the listeners to take away that you don't have to be a 50 million turnover business. You could be a 50,000 turnover business. It doesn't matter, so long as you have a go-to that you can get this expertise, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Generally the language might change, but the brutality of some of these contracts are they're either very high in terms of risk or medium, but they're definitely not low. There's a risk in all contracts. Would you agree on that? Or
100%. Every contract, and I'll even go further than that. Every contract, even outside construction, just every contract period, comes with risk. If there wasn't risk, the other person wouldn't be asking you to enter into a contract. So that's why it's so important to just there's this, I think human nature, human instinct is to sort of bury your head in the sand when you feel overwhelmed. And I think contracts feel overwhelming to most people, at least in the beginning, before they really get a handle on them. And so it's easier to just sort of say, out of sight, out of mind, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I haven't had a catastrophic claim, so I don't need to worry about this. And I get it. It's human nature. Like, you're not alone in doing that, but there's huge risk in doing that people don't really usually understand that they're actually undertaking. They're assuming huge, massive risk by signing contracts that they haven't read or haven't understood. And it's not as scary as they think it's going to be. It's one of those things that's like, if you just pull the Band-Aid off, at the end, you're like, well, that wasn't that bad at all.
Okay, so let's look at that. Let's look at the scenario just to give the listeners and the viewers sort of, how catastrophic and traumatic these events can be. So let's just hit them with a number. So billable hours, average billable hours for a contract law issue. What's your take? Typically what would an average lawyer bill for hours wise for a problem like with contracts?
So if you're talking about in the scenario where you have not been proactive with your contract ownership and you're now in a lawsuit, you're probably not going to get out of that lawsuit for less than, I'm going to say, $25,000 to $50,000. And that's probably on a good day. If it gets real contentious and you have to really fight, it's going to be upwards of $75,000 to just get out of the lawsuit. And by the way, when I say that number, I'm just talking about attorney fees. I'm not talking about what you may actually ultimately having to pay out to the other side as a settlement or a judgment.
Yeah. Expert witnesses,
100%.
All the rest of it that goes with it. So But in terms of hours, what does that compute to in terms of hours?
Oh gosh, Gavin, you're asking me to do math? I went to law school, so I didn't have to do math. Here, I got a calculator in front of me.
Okay, so would one person be dedicated to a contract for X amount of days, or for, would it be full on for like a 2-month period, or what?
No, so that's the frustrating part about litigation. So that number would be spread out over the lifetime of the litigation. So when I said earlier, when I was talking about my client and that catastrophic loss that they were facing, that lawsuit lasted like 4 years. So that number is spread out over time. It's not often going to be a giant lump sum at the beginning, because that's the nature of litigation. It's like you'll have some months where I bill you barely anything because there's just not anything happening in the lawsuit for a variety of reasons.
Unfortunately for the contractor, we're completely, hands up. We have to hand you over a blank invoice for you to decide what number you're going to put on that. And I know that, I'm not saying that's going to be manipulated by any means, because, we're all here to do a job, and we don't want to ruin a business that's trying to fight for its life, because that's not a good thing. That's not a good result for you guys either. But I suppose what we're trying to say here is, minimum you're looking at a 50 grand issue per case, and that's just a starting point. So
yeah, and I think the real cautionary part of that is understanding that by the time if you end up in an actual dispute and there are attorneys involved, you can only control 1/2 of the bill. And by that, what I mean is we have no control over what the other side decides to do. And if they decide to do something, oftentimes we have no choice but to then respond, because otherwise we're now putting your case in jeopardy. So that's why when my clients ask me for a litigation budget, it's always a range, because I say, okay, well, we can make the strategic decision to do our side on a shoestring, but you need to know that if the other side decides to do all of these things, destructive testing, expert witnesses, all of these things that are very expensive, we can't sit back and do nothing and just let that happen. We have to then engage as well. And so if let's say you've got a David and Goliath type of situation where you've got a huge flush GC on one side and a small mom and pop guy on the other, a strategy is to outspend. They could make the strategy of like, we're going to do every single thing that the legal code allows us to do.
We're going to bury you.
Exactly. Because we can absorb that cost. It's not going to hurt us, but we know this guy can't play that game. He can't keep up.
I was just thinking of that. Yeah. So that's so like, and that's just the way the system is. And that's the way it is worldwide. That's not specific to California. So if I'm the big general contractor, I'm going to say, right, you want to fight? We have the time and we have the resources to just stretch this thing out until such a stage as you're not actually physically doing any work, because you're spending more time trying to fight this case. And that's so sad.
I know. And the other part of it that's like so inequitable about it is, in my experience, GCs are far more likely to have in-house counsel than subcontractors are. So it's not even costing them anything. They're paying that person their salary regardless of what they're doing. So why not have them try to bury you? It's not costing them anything extra. Whereas the subcontractor is less likely to have that person. So they're paying somebody like me, who's an outside attorney that they've hired, and now they're paying me hourly.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. And the other part of it as well, if the general contractor has a really good, strong case, even though they're in the wrong, they might say, let's ramp this up because there's an element of doubt, and the element of doubt favours us over the people that are trying to attack us in terms of getting money off us. So I'm sure then that they leverage that, and I'm sure you've seen plenty of cases of that where, as you say, they're just throwing up the billable hours, and you're sitting on the other side going, oh my God, these guys are paying for doctors and engineers and all this kind of stuff to come in here. Who's going to pay for that bill?
Absolutely.
Wow. I'm interested in it from a personal point of view as well, because we touched off it earlier on. How do you protect your personal being from the trauma of personal cases like that and litigation? How do you switch off? Is there a mechanism that you use, or is there something in general that you guys do in the legal industry to sort of, have this little club where you kind of share your stories and get it off your chest? or what way? Honestly, though, it must be very traumatic having to see people suffer in these ways. Though, like, I'm sure you have to protect yourself in some way. Like, how do you do it?
So this is one of the reasons why I never went into family law. One of the many reasons, because at least as a construction attorney, I'm dealing with businesses, right? And those are still humans. But at the end of the day, when I'm having a conversation with my client, they can vent out the emotional part of it. But at the end of the day, 99% of the time, they'll make a business decision. And so it is easier as compared to the sort of more personal types of things. But it does still, you're right. I mean, like the story that I was talking about earlier, that client, I mean, I lost a lot of sleep over that too, because it was like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. It was like, he was feeling like, if we lose this thing, the client I have lost my family legacy. But I was feeling like, well, you didn't do anything. It's on me now. Megan the attorney, I'm going to be the one that's going to lose your family legacy.
Handing it over to you.
Exactly. And that's actually one of the pitches that I make to my law firm clients. I say, like, look, if you're losing sleep, then I'm not doing my job. You pay me to stress about this so you don't have to, so you can do your work, right? And so you're right. I do. I think the way I deal with it is, first of all, I have a very supportive and understanding spouse who's also in the construction space. That's how we met. And so I have a safe space where I can, with somebody who really gets it and understands it truly, that I can kind of...
Happy anniversary, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. We just had our 7-year anniversary earlier this week. Thank you. So that's one way. But the other way is I have always had this you could argue it's one of my strengths, I guess, but I've always had this very, very, very protective streak that gets triggered very easily. It's probably why I became a litigator. And so when I feel like my clients are being attacked or my clients are feeling attacked, that part of me comes forward subconsciously, and now I'm in attack mode. And so there's no, like, I don't have any feelings at that point. I am pure attack and pure protect. Really, I really am. And so it's probably why my clients stay with me for as long as they do.
I hope your spouse doesn't listen to his podcast, Megan.
Well, no, he knows. That's why. That's actually how we met. He saw me doing one of these trainings for one of his. He worked for one of my clients back in the day, and I was doing one of these trainings, and it was why he fell in love with me. So he knows all about it. He's never on the receiving end in a negative way. He loves that part of me. But yeah, so really, I mean, that's probably why my clients. I have exclusively long-term clients. Almost all of my clients have been with me for many, many, many years, and that's probably why, because they get that from me. They're like, man, we know Megan's going to fight for us. Like, so it acts, that sort of streak in me acts as a protective barrier to me too, because I'm just like, I don't have time to wallow in like feeling bad or sad or upset or empathetic or any of those things. I got a job to do, man. Like, I am the one that is between this threat and my client. I am the shield. That's why my logo is a shield. I'm the shield between my client and the threat. And I take that very, very seriously.
Yeah. And I'm sure there is lost cases where you kind of say, look, cut your losses here, pal. This doesn't look good. And my advice to you is just cut ties and walk away, because if we go down this road, I can't guarantee that as much and all as I'll fight it on your behalf, just get out.
Yes, I do. The analogy that I like to use with my law firm clients is I'm the navigator. So I'm sitting in the front seat giving you the directions that I think are the best directions to get from point A to point B. But ultimately, you're driving the car. So you get to decide whether you follow the directions that I'm giving you or you take an alternate route. Either way, I'm still your co-pilot. I'm still right there.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Like, I love this conversation because, what would a program take if I was setting up a construction company and said, okay, I'm definitely going to sort out legal first because I don't want to get burnt. So what would that look like if I came on board the Megan Shapiro coach program?
So I've got a couple of different options. I've got a sort of done with you option and then a do it yourself option. So
Okay.
I do have an online course that you and I talked about when we first connected a couple of months ago. It's now launched and done. It was following my old format under my old branding. And so that's good news for listeners who might be interested in taking that course. It is a proactive risk management course that takes a holistic approach and looks at risk in all facets of the business, which I think is super important for the person you're asking about, that person that's like, I'm getting ready to start. I want to do it right from the beginning, because we start talking about strategic corporate formation. We talk about insurance strategies, of course, contracts, of course, documentation policies and procedures that you should be putting in place from the very beginning, training for your team that you should be doing from the very beginning, and continuous improvement. The good news, since I've made this pivot, is that I slashed the price on that online course. And so it used to be $1,197. It is now only $397 because I'm not going to be updating it. I'm going to be pivoting. So that's one way. You can enroll in the online course, $397. It's 8 modules. They are designed specifically with construction leaders in mind. So the video portions are also audio, so you don't have to be sitting at a computer. You can listen while you're on the go. And they are no longer than 20 minutes because I know what attention spans are like and how busy construction leaders are.
Yeah.
So they're designed to be super to the point, jam-packed in a short period of time. And then the real value is in each module has what I call a mini blueprint, where you take the lesson that I've learned, that I've taught you in that module in the audio or video, and you actually apply it to your specific business. So by the time you complete the course, 8 modules, you have one master blueprint for your proactive risk management strategy within your company. So that's
kind of like a workbook.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's fillable worksheets with guided questions and things like that.
Brilliant.
So that's the sort of do-it-yourself option.
Yeah.
For
Light touch.
And then the other one is the coaching, which is now what I'm doing. So that looks like a couple of different things as well. One-on-one coaching, of course, that has historically been at the C-suite. Those are the people who are usually coming to me and saying, I want the one-on-one coaching. COOs, CEOs, things like that are saying, okay, this is my business and I need to own it. So we do a series of 8. We start with 8, but it's customizable. 8 lessons, 1 hour each, and we dig into all of the different areas and facets of the business, and with a heavy emphasis on the contracts. And then the other is in-person trainings or online live trainings, but for the whole team. So I just did one of these a couple of weeks ago for a mechanical, electrical, and plumbing company. They had a team of like 25 project managers, and they just felt like they needed to level up and that they didn't have as good of a handle on contracts as they wanted them to. So they brought me in and we did a series of 2 trainings, about 2 hours each day. And we literally went from how to read a construction contract from beginning to end. And we went through every single thing that matters, every single thing that you can ignore, negotiation strategies for how to advance those red lines and have those conversations with the GC, all the things that you and I talked about at the beginning of this podcast. So I won't repeat myself, but that's actually my preferred method because I like
more like a workshop.
Yeah. Yes. More like a workshop. Yeah. It is very interactive.
And it can be, you can use a live document. Like, by the way, here's what we're working on at the moment. Why don't we use that as the guinea pig?
What we actually did for them was they sent me their contracts, and we used their actual contracts. So that way the PMs are looking at contracts they've already seen and they're familiar with. And we were able to then work with some of the issues that had popped up on the jobs for the contracts that they gave me.
And again, that's not California specific. That can be it can be anywhere. Brilliant. So you've got the light touch model, kind of 8 to 10 modules, in around 8 modules, 20-minute videos. I can just download that today and do that myself if I'm just kicking off. If I'm scaling and getting a bit more mature, I probably want to reach out to you, do one-to-one coaching, or maybe I want executive leadership coaching so that, the risk committee that I've created within the business has an understanding of the legality of their own roles and the accountability of their own roles, what that looks like for them themselves individually, and then also what that looks like as a corporate structure. And then you have the dynamic, let's get down into the weeds and let's talk to middle management and senior management together in a collaborative way so that we have a clear vision and future of what our legal responsibilities are and what our legal contracts say we can do and we can't do.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think I got you. I love it. Yeah, because when you were talking, and I think I spoke to you about that before, but we set up I set up a website giving away free safety documentation for contractors, specifically for contractors, because we kept on getting asked to help small contractors with their paperwork, but because of our price point on our main business, we were too pricey, and I couldn't drop the cost base, obviously. So what we decided, just look, why don't we have all this stuff sitting in our libraries? Why don't we just give it to them, put it into a professional manner, and just give it to them? And you wouldn't believe the amount of people that have signed up, obviously because it's free. But what were they doing anyway? They were going to Facebook and they were going to WhatsApp groups and stuff like that, and just like downloading it or getting it off friends. Whereas, people kind of, as you said earlier on, stick their head in the sand and kind of go, well, it's not going to happen to me. And, I think the best time for people when they go on holidays, I know they try to switch off, but I know for a fact that business owners are listening to podcasts and audiobooks on business, even though they're supposed to be switching off. So, it's a good time as well if you're having some downtime to get in and start, doing some of these things and sort of like, oh, hold on a minute, I need to do more of that. And the purpose of this podcast, obviously, as well, is if you're traveling home with your 45 minutes in the van, that you're picking up stuff like what we're talking about today to help people navigate the risks within their business. And I think it's a credit to you that you've dropped the price point. And I know that that's probably a marketing message for yourself in terms of trying to find a market for what the market will absorb from a price point of view. I don't think they probably would have paid over 1,000, but I think the 300 is kind of like, it's 300. Like it's not the end of the world. It's like a day and a half of somebody's daily pay or something to that effect.
And I do have a money back guarantee, and a payment plan. So it really is sort of no risk.
You have a money back guarantee?
I do, 30-day money back guarantee.
Wow, fair play to you. And what way does the payment plan work?
So because it's 8 modules and the content is dripped, and it's dripped by design. So you only get access to 1 module per week, because I want you to actually do the work of applying it to the workbook. So because it takes 8 weeks to get through it, the payment plan is 2 months. And so it's like half of the $397 for the first month and then the other half for the second month. But in any case, the 30-day risk-free guarantee refund policy applies to whether you pay in full or the payment plan.
Brilliant. So we'll put all this in the show notes for the viewers and the listeners to download. So links, I presume. What's the name of the website, Megan?
So my website is meganshapiro.com, meganshapiro.com. And there's just a button right at the very top that says online course. So you can access it that way. There's also a spot on my website for free resources. To your point about your free safety resources, I also have a ton of free guides and resources available for download through my website as well.
Yeah. So and I know you're strong on LinkedIn as well. So, give us all the links, because I'm sure people will want to reach out to you and to get to know more about this. So I'd like to throw a few curveball questions at you, if you don't mind, because I like to do it.
I'm ready.
You're ready?
Maybe.
Knowing what you know now, what would you do different? And that could be personal or it could be professional or both.
Well, this is probably a bad answer. Okay. I don't believe in doing things different. I don't believe in regret. I believe that my path led me to where I am now. And if I changed anything in the past, I wouldn't get to where I am now. And I'm extremely happy in both my personal and professional lives. Brilliant. And I wouldn't want to risk, I believe in the butterfly effect. I wouldn't want to risk derailing where I am now by making any small change in the past.
Love it. Great answer. That's a brilliant answer, actually. Favorite book, and it can be fictional, it can be business, it can be whatever it is. Maybe you don't read books or listen to books.
I listen to so many books. I'm a huge fan of Audible.
I was only joking with you.
Oh, okay. I'm a huge fan of Audible, and I read actual physical books as well. That's a really tough question. So I guess my answer, I have so many. I give you whole lists. So what I'm going to go with instead, and this is especially since this is designed to actually get to know the personal side of me. I do listen to a ton of business books, but I'm also a little bit of a nerd. And I really, really enjoy the fantasy series around The Sword of Truth. So it's a series. I think they're at like 18 books now.
Wow.
And they're, those long 1,000-page fantasy novels. And the very first one is called The Sword of Truth. And then they go from there.
The Sword of Truth.
The sword, like sword of truth.
Oh, The Sword of Truth. Okay.
Yeah. Good kind is the last name of the author.
You get that on Audible. Do you listen to it, or do you actually physically read them?
I don't know if those are on Audible. I actually physically read those. I have some of the series in paperback book because when I used to work in San Francisco, and I would take public transportation and I'd be on there for a couple of hours during my commute. And so I'd read my paper books. But then I got like a Kindle at some point, and they were on Kindle too. So it was easier to carry on the train.
A funny story. I know of a business guy, and he hasn't come up with the times in terms of Audible. Now, I used Audible again on a holiday, and I was like, oh my god, I'm using this all the time because my eyesight is going, and I just haven't got the focus, whatever else. But he's not going to do that, so he's still hard copy all the way. And what he does is he takes sections of the book, he cuts them out with a Stanley knife, with a sharp knife. So he takes out 25, 30 pages at a time, and he leaves them in the toilet. So every time he goes to the toilet, obviously, he has a section and he reads his book. It's like...
Wow.
Yeah. Favorite holiday destination and why?
So in California, we have a beautiful coastal line up north called Mendocino. It's actually where I got married, and it is absolutely beautiful. It looks to me, I have not yet had the privilege of visiting Ireland. It is on my bucket list. I am Irish, so it's on my bucket list, or I have Irish heritage. So it's on my bucket list. I haven't been there, but the pictures that I've seen of Ireland look very similar to the Mendocino coast. So it's that sort of rocky. Wow.
Yeah.
And so I'm describing it that way, probably you can picture it. And the weather is just, it's always beautiful. It never gets super hot. It's a little windy and sometimes a little rainy, but I much prefer that. And so that we love to go there to vacation, and it is our dream to, as I said, my husband is in construction. And so he has always wanted to build a house by hand, like from the ground up. And so my dream is to do it over there. So that's sort of on the bucket list of longtime goals, is for him to build us a house by hand on the Mendocino coast.
Brilliant.
But we'd like to get there as much as we can.
Brilliant. Well, when you come to Ireland, you're not going to get the weather. I'm just going to tell you straight up. You might be lucky and get some nice weather, but you'll definitely get the views.
Yeah.
Cars, favorite car? Have you got a favorite vehicle or a favorite car or favorite truck?
Well, I've got one that's on my vision board for the next vehicle that I want, which is a Toyota 4Runner.
Ford Runner?
A Toyota 4Runner 4.
Oh, 4Runner. Okay.
It's a 4Runner. So, it's an SUV.
Okay, so it's on the bucket list, or it's on the vision board.
The vision board. Yep.
Okay, a final one, and that's it. I promise you. Most inspirational person that you've met?
Oh, this is like such a cheesy answer. My husband.
Oh, he's definitely listening to this. He's definitely going to have to listen
I'm not even earning any brownie points, because this is a running joke on LinkedIn, is that I talk about my husband kind of a lot, and he just refuses to, he doesn't watch any of my podcasts. He doesn't engage on LinkedIn. He's like, you do you, babe, but he's not. So he won't even see this, but it's true. He is, he's definitely one of the most inspirational people I've ever met.
I love it. I think you're going to have to have I think you're going to have to join all the other podcasters with a marriage podcast for the two of you.
I pitched the idea to him, and he is open to thinking about it, but he's nervous because he doesn't do anything like this. And so he's like, I had a live stream of my own earlier this week, and I said, hey, you should come on. You don't even have to say anything. And he was like, I need more time to mentally prepare. And I was like, you need time to mentally prepare to just watch? Like, what? So he's very, He's very skittish, but he's open to it. So I'm working on it.
That's what will make it all the more better, because he won't. He'll be very authentic. I can see it now. Yin and yang.
I know. Yeah, it would be like that. I need to circle back with him on that. You're giving me the encouragement I needed.
Megan Shapiro, what a great guest you have been today. And I'm sure people will take a lot away from our discussion. And if they don't, no big deal. We're just here to give the information out there to show the people that there is access to people like yourself who are highly qualified, highly competent in what you do. And why wouldn't you sort of spend a bit of time to put this type of risk into some sort of a manageable format? And I credit you for focusing and helping the small to medium construction enterprise. So well done. And thanks so much for joining us on I'm the Gaffer.
Thank you so much for having me. And parting words, I'll just say, if you think you can't afford it, send me a DM. I'll show you how affordable it really is. Don't make assumptions and assume it's not for you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Megan. And we wish you the best.
Thank you so much for having me.